The final group games of the Nations League gave us a great many things. It gave us the Final Four that made their way to Las Vegas for the CONCACAF Nations League semifinals coming up in June. I'm getting excited about that. I'm sure you are as well. Much more excited than I was a couple years ago. So, someone who was a little bit dismissive of the Nations League, I'm all in. Especially to go to Las Vegas. Certainly you don't have to ask me to do that twice. It gave us a lot of things, though. In addition to the Final Four, it also gave us some talking points, some food for thought, courtesy of Canadian forward Cyle Larin, who, in a post-game interview after he scored 2 goals for Canada as they beat Honduras 4-1 to book their spot into the Final Four, he said it wasn't very pointed, it wasn't malicious, he kind of said it in a very matter-of-fact way, said that Canada are the big boys of CONCACAF, a.k.a. the giants of the region. And then everyone would go, wait a minute, including yourself, wait a minute, whoa, this is CONCACAF. It's USA and Mexico and the rest. That's how it's always been, right? And then you start to, you say you want to dismiss it and you want a reality check. But then you stop and think and you're like, perhaps, maybe in a short-term window, perhaps he has a point. And he might have a very good one if you're depending on how you look at the criteria. But Canada has enough things when you start counting on your fingers to suggest that it's not a wild boast, it's not out of order, it's something with some validity. I don't think they are the big boys of CONCACAF. And I don't think we can really answer it with the criteria. We can make an educated guess. But the reality is we won't know for sure until the 2026 World Cup. The end of this cycle, when all 3 countries will be hosting the World Cup, the majority of the games in the United States, we will know then. And we are going to dig into all of that here on the Soccer OG. Check out the Soccer OG podcast where all podcasts are available. I will have Brian Sciaretta of America Soccer. Now, we will discuss the situation with U.S. Soccer and why it's taking so long to get a sporting director. Come on! We'll also talk, I'll ask him about, is Canada a big boy? Because he follows all the American players, both sides of every border here between Canada, USA, as well as Mexico. Also, like and subscribe us here. Check us out. We appreciate all those who have joined in watching these videos. You can check out the entire library. Also, go check out the entire library of Soccer OG podcasts. I think you'll enjoy that. So, what do we make of Cyle Larin's comments? I will say this. We know this definitively. Sorry, I watch itching my eye. Sometimes it makes a lot of noise when I rub my eyes. You don't want to hear that. I will tell you this. Canada's emergence over the last 3 years, remember this was a nation that had not qualified for the World Cup since 1986. They made it in 2022. But the emergence of Canada is the best thing to happen in CONCACAF in years. We couldn't rely on USA, Mexico. We've had Costa Rica come up. Honduras has had its moment in the sun. Panama's trying. But not like what Canada did, which not only made a push and won the World Cup qualifying for 2022 in the sense of won it by finishing first, but have also seen a conveyor belt of the best talent anywhere in CONCACAF. And that makes a big difference. And you can include Cyle Larin in that discussion. He is on loan at Valladolid. He's scoring goals for the Spanish club and perhaps is going to save them. He's been an important contributor and part of a very exciting Canadian attack. All of these guys that we will talk about are all delivering the goods in some way, shape, or form. But Canada being good, it certainly feels like it's here to stay. We know, much like U.S. soccer, Canada soccer has its flaws. Check out my podcast with Sid Sachero, and we can talk about the issues with Canada. As good as their program is on the field with the emergence of the men's team and the women's team, and remember, USA-Canada's got a great rivalry on the women's game, but Canada winning the Olympics, and they'll be amongst the teams that feel like they can win the Women's World Cup later this year in Australia and New Zealand. But Canada's emergence is here to stay, and it's the best thing because you get a natural rival for USA and Mexico. Now when you play these big games, and remember, the world has separated itself, right? In soccer, the Nations League means Europe plays Europe, South America plays South America, and CONCACAF plays CONCACAF. And you can't just do it with games against Mexico. You got to have more big games. Canada's provided that. So I can answer without question that Canada's emergence is instrumental in CONCACAF getting a bigger seat at the table in world football. We know that. A lot of optimism, and there, again, no signs of it stalling. But are they the big boys of CONCACAF? Now, there's data here that says Canada is the big boys. I mentioned finishing first in World Cup qualifying. Don't look at the FIFA rankings, because I think USA's 13, and they haven't been updated for a while. USA's 13, Mexico's 15. I think Canada's in the 50s, which boggles my mind, some of the countries they are behind. They deserve to be a little further up. When you look at the best players in CONCACAF, the best two might be Canadian. And I know everyone's going, wow, Christian Pulisic. Christian Pulisic cannot be ranked ahead of, obviously, Alphonso Davies, who is the clear number one, and can't be ranked ahead of Jonathan David, who, in addition to doing well for Canada, is continuing to be a huge goal-scoring force in Ligue 1. So, I mean, we talk about Folarin Balogun, and we can't count him as American yet, but Jonathan David has more goals in France than Balogun does. So we're raving about Balogun. David has more goals. So, without question, they have the best player in CONCACAF. They certainly have the best forward. USA or Mexico can't compete with the number 9 Canada does, but David might be the second best player. You look at young players that are now breaking through in Europe and doing very well. Tejan Buchanan had a nice run with Club Brugge in the Champions League. Ismail Kone playing pretty regularly with Watford, playing pretty regularly with Canada. This is a guy who was at Major League Soccer. You can see he is really emerging. Alistair Johnson went over to Celtic, becoming a big part of everything they do. And Stephen Eustachio plays every day for Porto. He's just 26. So everything from the midfield up, I would rather have that Canadian group. The USA, I think, is a better team from back to front, better goalkeepers, better defenders, better fullbacks, better midfields, so to speak. But I mean, Canada has enough there. But when you look at Eustachio all the way forward, and you can throw out Buchanan and Kone, David and Davies, I would rather take that. So Canada has that. So they did it on the field in World Cup qualifying and the talent. And they've actually done pretty well in the Nations League group stages. So the semifinals are taking place in Las Vegas, and the pairings were determined by what they did in the groups. USA finished number 1. It was pretty tight, and it's not an accurate science by any means because they're different groups. We don't know about the opponents, but USA was 1. Panama actually second with Canada by a sliver, and Mexico was 4th. So Canada was ranked higher than Mexico. So if you want to be the big boys at CONCACAF, you got to be ahead of Mexico at the least. And I got to be honest, I really do believe right now the conversation is USA and Canada, which is stunning. Mexico's going to be back, but if you look at the results from the under-20s, they won the under-17s in CONCACAF, but the under-20s, they failed. The Olympics, failure, and World Cup, a massive failure for the first time, wanting to get to the 5th game, they didn't even get to the 4th game. No quinto partido, no cuatro partido. They played 3 partidos. Canada, I want to talk about the World Cup too. And, when we think of Canada's World Cup effort, we're going to think of John Herdman and Croatia. Big mistake on his part. And I don't know if he would take it back. I don't think he's that kind of guy to take it back. But that's what we think about it. But look at what they did in the World Cup. This ended up being the toughest group. We didn't know at the time. It was Belgium, it was Croatia, it was Morocco. And then Canada, after Croatia, lost to the Croats 4-1. Remember, Croatia made a semifinal. In the other games, I think they should have beaten Belgium. They lost 1-0. And then they lose to Morocco 2-1, and they were really pressing a Morocco team that would also end up making a semifinal and was probably pretty close to making a final. I rewatched that France-Morocco game. Morocco had a real shot there. It wasn't an outclassing by any means. So history is going to be very kind to Canada when you look at what happened in that World Cup. And all in all, they have, a ranking, and Canada, I think, was last or second last based on goals and everything in the groups. They didn't win a game. They didn't tie a game. But they weren't smashed out of there by any means. So, I mean, history will be kind to that World Cup effort. And that was it certainly was a platform to set for 2026. I don't think anyone thought Canada was, maybe they make the round of 16, but that was going to be it. This was a realistic thing for a country that hadn't been in a World Cup in 36, 38 years, whatever. I'm sorry, my math stinks, so I don't want to count it in my head because I'll go off on a tangent. But that World Cup performance looking better every day because of what Croatia and Morocco did. Getting back to the talent, and America's got a much higher ceiling. They're developing more players that are going up. Mexico is not doing that right now, but you'd like to see them do it. Canada is doing it, but it is Canada. It's the population-wise. Being in a country where you're going to have to train indoors, it's very cold, is going to limit them in what they can do. But I would not underestimate them. They have a lot of things in their favor. We've seen their immigration policy has allowed players like David and Davies to excel. There's going to be more success stories there. It is a cosmopolitan international group that is representing Canada more so than the United States. It gives them an edge. And by the way, Canadian sport is on the up and up across the board. Look at what they're doing in basketball. I mean, it used to be one Canadian was in the NBA. There's like 10 or 15, and that list continues to grow. And they're prominent players that are playing at a very high level. Canada is doing well in basketball, and they're doing well in soccer. That's no accident. Participation's high, and whatever they're doing with sport to connect their population, it's working. Remember, hockey is the number one, but Canada, small country population-wise and compared to the USA and Mexico, getting the most out of its athletes. That is a system at work. Now, defensively is where you want to see some more improvement, and that is where the U.S. will, I think, by a slim margin, win the conversation. Because they have good fullbacks in Anthony Robinson and Serginho Dest, good young fullbacks like Brian Reynolds, and then they have 6 probably excellent center backs that I would probably take ahead of the best Canadian central defender. And even just, we saw Miles Robinson playing a lot better. And Cameron Carter-Vickers and Chris Richards didn't even go to the March camp. And Walker Zimmerman, and the list is good. Tim Ream. Canada can't touch that. The United States is a better defensive team, and I think that gives them an edge at the end of the day. Right now they have a better manager because we don't have one really. And the disorganization, but from what everyone I've heard in Canada, the disorganization is rampant there, but John Herdman has proven to be a wonderful choice and a guy who has the ear of these players. So I think I've run down the list. We will get a better idea of where these two countries stand June the 15th and June the 18th. It's perfectly poised. The semifinals will be USA and Mexico. And I love the way it's set up here because in essence, we're getting 2 finals. Last year at the Nations League, or 2 years ago in the Nations League, we were terrified we wouldn't get USA-Mexico. We got it by the slimmest of margins. We're going to get it. And then we should get USA-Canada in the final, which would usher in a new era, a new powerhouse matchup in CONCACAF. And whoever wins that game, if we see it, and I'm not selling Mexico or Panama short here. Panama's been very impressive, by the way, in that competition. But USA-Canada will be the harbinger of things to come as we move towards it. So that'll be our first piece. Say what you want about the Nations League. We can talk about who the big boy of CONCACAF is. But if USA plays Canada or Mexico plays Canada in the Nations League final, that is on the field. That's an important date. That is an important fixture. Everyone's going to take it seriously. We can crown somebody a soft crown on that day. But then again, 2026 looms large. It should be very good. So, in closing, is Canada the big boys in CONCACAF? They deserve it. They've done everything in their power in a rapid movement to get there. They have the better talent in offensive positions, and when you're rating all the players, the Canadian players will end up on top. Let's see if they can do it on the field. They had success against the U.S. They had success against Mexico in World Cup qualifying. That was a long time ago. I respect Cyle Larin for saying that. I appreciate him for saying that because we can talk about it here. And I love the fact that Canada is here and wants to be counted. And it's none of this nice guy Canada stuff. They've got good talent. They need more volume of good talent. But man, they have some good numbers at the top. So I don't know if he's right, but he's not wrong. Soccer OG. Check out the Soccer OG podcast where all podcasts are available. A warm welcome to our friends in Canada tuning in to see about their national team. I love you guys. Thanks for making the region better. And don't go anywhere. Make sure you let people know you are here to stay. Just another exciting day in the world of CONCACAF. There's no slow days. Let's go.